Hey, welcome back to the Too Fast channel. In this narration, I'm going to be talking over a slideshow of installation of component speakers in the front doors of a Volkswagen EOS 2008 model. The speakers I will be installing are the Infinity Kappa 60.11 CS. Those have a 6.5 inch woofer and 3/4 inch soft dome tweeter and a two-way passive crossover network. This video will not cover removal of the door panel or disconnecting any of the switches. I'll put a link in the description to information that will help you actually remove the door panel. So once you get the door panel removed, the first thing we're going to do is remove the factory woofer. You're going to need to unclip the plug that's plugged into the speaker, and you're going to need a drill with a very small drill bit because this speaker is riveted to the door panel. And you'll see in the center of the rivet is a small little hole. You need a drill bit that kind of fits into that, and you'll drill through the rivet. And if things go well, the top of the rivet will pop off and you can remove the speaker. Make sure you clean up all of the metal debris from drilling out the rivets. You'll also need a rivet gun to reinstall this. This is the bezel piece that's on the factory speaker, which you didn't see in the previous pictures because I took it off before I took the pictures, but this will be on yours as well. So you can remove this. Best to do it before you drill out the rivets. It's easier. Once you get the speaker out and get it on the bench, what we're going to do is cut the speaker out of this plastic frame assembly, and we're going to use the plastic frame assembly to install our new Infinity Kappa 6.5 inch woofer. So this is where your Dremel, your rotary tool with your cutoff wheel, your grinder bits, and your sanding bits is going to come in real handy. Hand files if you've got them. Utility knife because you're going to cut the cone out, and when you get the cone cut out, this is kind of what you're going to be left with. You're going to be left with the magnet structure, and the magnet structure is kind of held in place with these plastic arms. Get in there with your rotary tool, cut out those plastic arms, remove that whole magnet structure because we won't need any of that. You can throw it away. Put the sanding disc on your rotary tool and get in there and sand down any leftover plastic material so it's all nice and smooth for the installation of the Infinity woofer. This is how the existing speaker leads are connected to the frame. You're going to have to cut out most of this, but the two little metal silver tabs with the two little holes in each of them, don't cut those off. You need to keep those. You'll see that in the addition. You'll see these in the next coming up pictures. You want to keep those because we're going to reutilize those. We're going to solder new speaker wire onto those. So make sure you don't jump the gun and cut those off, and you'll make your life more difficult. Once you're all done cutting and sanding, this is what you're going to end up with. You're going to end up with this frame right here. And you can see we've got our two little tabs intact. Make sure you go in and sand down the inside so the inside's nice and smooth. This installation's a little bit easier than the rears. The rear Infinity woofers have a pretty large basket on them, and those are pretty tight. There's a little bit more space in this for doing this installation. This is just the backside of the frame assembly. Of course, the backside has some foam material on it. If this foam material is coming loose, get some glue it back down. It's kind of a vibration dampening material to keep the whole assembly from vibrating when it's mounted to your door. So it's best to leave it there, or you could replace it with something else if you had something better you could put on there. But in my case, it was coming loose in a few areas, so I used some glue, some super 33 3M glue to glue it back down. And this picture right here shows this is a speaker adapter plate that comes with the 60.11 CS Infinity speaker, and we're going to utilize this. So we're going to bolt this down and you can see I've got it bolted down with some little washers, and you kind of need this to get the speaker to fit correctly. And once you get that bolted into place, you can fit your speaker and then bolt the speaker down. Because of that plate, you're going to have a bunch of little excess holes that could cause air leakage from the rear of the woofer to the front. We don't want that. You can see I went in with clear hot glue, and I sealed all of the any possible air leakage. I ran a bead around the edge of the speaker where the frame meets the plastic, and all those little holes around the screws, I sealed it up so it's completely airtight. After I was done with that, I used some regular door weather stripping material. I think it was a 1/2 inch, and I fitted it between the speaker and the plastic frame assembly. That's just an extra measure of sealant to prevent any type of air leakage. But since it's sealed up with the hot glue, the weather stripping is probably not really necessary, so it might be a little overkill. At this point, you can attach the wiring. Actually, you should do the wiring before this. I don't have pictures of me soldering the wire, but you should, before you screw the speaker into the frame assembly and silicone it in or hot glue it in, you should connect your speaker wire and solder the ends of the speaker wire onto the tabs of the frame and connect it to the speaker. Then put the speaker in the frame, screw it down, and then use your hot glue or your silicone. So this is a little out of order, apologize for that. So we're done with the speaker. We're going to move on to the tweeter. You can remove your tweeter pod with the door panel off. There's one screw holding it in place. You can take that screw out, remove the pod, and unplug the wiring from the harness. Take it over to your bench. There's a foam piece that goes on the back of this, and you can remove the foam. The tweeter is held in place with some white silicone glue type material. Use a utility knife to cut all that out. There's also a capacitor there. Cut around that because you're going to remove the capacitor and the tweeter. This is the new Infinity tweeter. It does come with a grill already on it. You can remove that using a small flat blade screwdriver, kind of pry up on it, and you can pop that off. Just make sure you don't damage the soft dome tweeter itself. We won't need that grill, so you can set that aside. And what we're going to do now is we're going to take this tweeter and we're going to press fit it into the speaker pod. It's not going to snap into place 100%. You'll have to work it in there, and once you get it situated and leveled, you'll need to go back in with some silicone or some hot glue and run a bead all the way around the tweeter and the plastic frame. Let it dry so it stays in place and doesn't pop back out. Now we're done with the pod. We're going to move on to installing the new Infinity Kappa 6.5 inch woofer into the door. This is where you need a pop rivet gun, because you're gonna either need to rivet this back into place like I did, or you can buy some little stud pieces that go in those holes, and then you can use a conventional screw to screw it down. I didn't have those, so I used my rivet gun and I pop riveted the speaker back into place. But if I was to do this again, I would get those studs and I would use screws and I would screw it in, because drilling out these rivets is kind of a pain. So that more or less takes care of the installation of the speaker. We need to mount the crossover next, and I chose to mount the crossover right in this location. This is the stock location for the mid-range speaker. If you have the Dynaudio sound system, you'd have a speaker here. I did not, so I only had a tweeter and a woofer. So this was a blank spot. But to mount the crossover here, I had to cut off one of these little mounting tabs, which you'll see coming up in the next slide picture. Just a second. A few more seconds before I continue on talking. I want to get to the right. You'll see right there I had to grind that down. As I was grinding it down, I actually grinded a hole. This is a plastic panel. So I have high temp aluminum foil tape. I put a piece of tape over that to seal that off so there's no moisture or anything coming from the outside part of the door to the inside. So I sealed that off before I mounted the crossover. I mounted the crossover. I used 3M two-sided tape, which gave me a pretty good, was pretty adhesive, but I wasn't 100% sure that would be solid, so I actually, around the tape, I used some hot glue, and then around the outside of the crossover assembly, I also put hot glue around that. I wanted to make sure that the opening and the slamming of the door, the crossover didn't pop off. So it's got two-sided tape and hot glue on the underside and on the outside edge of it. You can then wire up your tweeter and your woofer to the crossover as shown here. The factory speaker wire needs to be cut. The speaker wire comes into a plug which plugs into the woofer, and then you have wiring coming out of the woofer that goes up to the tweeter. The wiring going into the plug needs to be cut. That needs to be routed to the input of the crossover. The output from the crossover for the woofer needs to be routed over to the woofer and spliced into that wiring. And then the output from the crossover for the tweeter needs to be routed over and spliced into the tweeter. So you've got to do some cutting and some splicing, and I apologize I don't have pictures of that. But if you look at the slideshow I did for installing speakers in the rear panels, there's a shot of how I cut the rear wiring harness there and spliced in some wire. So unfortunately I just didn't take pictures of that particular process. Anyway, this will give you an idea of one way you can install some component speakers to upgrade the factory speakers in your Volkswagen EOS that does not come with the Dynaudio sound system. Hopefully it's helpful, and thanks for watching.